Hello, interghost here, and this is My Life in Bits, episode 1. So I posted a teaser trailer back along about starting this new series called My Life in Bits. It's going to be something a little different. It's more sort of non-scripted, just memories and thoughts about the different computers and systems I had growing up through the years. Like I said, I've had pretty much every system going, from 8-bit computers right up to current day modern consoles, up into the Switch, PlayStation 4, that sort of era. So what I thought I would do is I'll just do this series where I would start on each system as I got them through the years, and I'll just sit down and have a little chat with you about my memories of those systems. Now what I will do in this first episode is I will just show you the computer that I'm talking about, and then following on from that I will be showing all the games that I personally owned on that system in order of when I got them and when I played them, and then just giving a little sort of talk about the game but also the memories behind those games. So not just putting the gameplay up saying this is what the game's about, but sort of giving you some idea of where I got these games from, what they mean to me, that type of thing. Once I've gone through all the games, then I will then move on to the next system and do the same thing, and hopefully go through the different generations of my life growing up in their different bit generations. So like I said, it's not scripted. I'm just going to pretty much make this up as I go along, so I'll probably forget a load of stuff, but hopefully things that I forget in this video I'll pick up in the gameplay videos as I go through. So the first computer I remember actually owning myself, well, I was actually probably bought by my dad, because I was only probably about 5 or 6 years old, and but me and my brother, mainly me, would play on this computer loads growing up, and that was the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Now from memory I do think we had the rubber key one first. That might just be a memory, but I've definitely owned a rubber key one several times in the past. Not sure if we had one as a kid. We definitely had probably 2 or 3 of these ones, because they are notorious for breaking. The power cable slot on the back, if you had the system on and you wobbled it or banged it, it would blow something inside the computer and it would knacker it. So I do believe this is one of our original ones from when we was a kid. Now if you've never seen a ZX Spectrum, Sinclair ZX Spectrum before, these were personal computers which were bought out by Sinclair back in the day, designed by somebody called Sir Clive Sinclair, and he had a mission that he was going to try and build home computers which were cheaply made and affordable for people to use at home. He actually made them more for doing work on, processing, programming, schoolwork, stuff like that. But as you know, these things were mainly used for gaming. I think there was an interview back along before he died, and he said that he never actually played any games on the Sinclair Spectrum, because he said he refused to play games on them because it wasn't a gaming machine, it was a business machine. But I think the sales of the games would have proved him wrong on that. Like I said, there was a rubber key one before this. There was actually, before the 48K one came out, there was a few other ones. I've got this one here. This is the ZX81, called the ZX81 because it's bought out in 1981. I think it's either 1K or 16K, I can't remember. This isn't an original that I had back. It is an original console, but computer, but it's not one that I owned as a kid. This is one I think my brother actually picked up somewhere, and I think he tried to power it on and it didn't actually work, so I just keep this as a display piece. But as you can see, the keys are very strange, more like a sort of I don't know, touchpad calculator type computer. Couldn't really do much on this. It was black and white graphics, very basic, but that's where it all started from. And then they brought out the 48K version, which 48K sounds very small memory nowadays, but the games they were able to produce on these were just amazing. On the back here you've got a place to plug in a joystick port, so you can play with the joystick as well as the keys. You've got a microphone and an earphone socket, because to play these games you would have to plug in a cassette recorder and play the games off a cassette, load them in using the sound from the tape to load in the machine code, and then the game would come up on your screen. The games would take 10-15 minutes to load. A lot of times they would crash and not work, but that's sort of the fond memories we have of kids just sitting there waiting for the game to load and then finding out it was a crap game, and then having to load another game up. And also we've got the TV aerial, which is the RF cable, which just plugs into the aerial slot of the TV, which we used to use to tune in the TV aerial on the roof of your house. So no SCARTs, no red, green, blue cables or whatever they are. You've got a couple of stands on the bottom here, so you can actually prop it up to help you type better. And yeah, so that's the 48K Spectrum really. So that's what it looked like. Like I said, they did break quite often. We did try to make our own programs on these back in the day as kids, but yeah, it was very hard to do. There was a lot of people who were able to do it, and they made games at home, and the companies would buy the games off them and sell them commercially, which was really cool. And that was always a dream of mine as a kid, to make a game and get it sold in the shops, but unfortunately I was too young and I didn't have the patience to learn coding and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what it looked like. Like I said, that was probably around 1985-86 when I was 5 or 6 years old. I can remember that the Spectrums were really huge at the time. Quite a lot of people had them. Obviously at that age I wasn't going around to many friends' houses or anything like that, but I do know a couple of my friends who lived opposite me had a Spectrum. My friend Paul, who you've seen in other videos, his dad had one, and obviously so he could play on it as well. And a couple of houses up from him was my friend Daniel and his brother Carl. They had a Spectrum. Theirs was actually hooked up to a black and white TV. I remember that originally. I think they got a colour TV a bit later on, but yeah, I can remember playing it on black and white as well at their house. A few doors up from them, obviously we used to just play with friends who lived locally. We didn't have internet or anything like that. There was another guy who was a bit older than us. I think his name was Peter from memory. He used to have one as well, so we used to borrow games, swap games with each other. Then obviously there was other people once we started going to school, because this probably was around for a good sort of 10 years or so. So growing up, sort of got into the playground wars. You either had a Spectrum, a Commodore 64 or an Amstrad, and people would argue which ones were better. Obviously I was a Spectrum fanboy, as I had one, and would defend it no matter what the other games looked like. I did play on the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad at my friend's house, and to be fair, the graphics were a lot better on those computers, but I still have a lot more love for the Spectrum just because that's what I grew up with, and everyone knows nostalgia is a huge factor when you're thinking back about these old systems. With regards to the games, they were quite cheap, although back then we sort of would get about, you know, £1 or £2 pocket money a week if you're lucky. And knowing that the games companies would bring out budget titles, so I've got a couple of them here. So you'd go to places like John Menzies, which was like it's like a news agent, like a big news agent, a bit like WH Smith's, which are still around today. They sold media as well, so they would have some shelves set up in the shop with the tapes all lined up on the shelf. They sometimes had the computers actually set up in the store as well, with a game playing on the screen, so you could see what the new games are. So what else was there? There was John Menzies, there was Boots, the chemist. They actually sold cassettes as well back in the day. Places like was it Tesco? Pretty sure the supermarkets had them as well. And there were some sort of small independent computer game shops as well, which sprung up and lasted for a few years and then disappeared again. So yeah, they had a budget range. So people like Mastertronic, they would have games like this. This is one of my all-time favourite games finders keepers. As you can see on there, it says the £1.99 range. So you could actually buy a game for £2, which is really cool. So like I said, you would get a couple of pounds pocket money maybe that week. You'd go into town, into the high street with your mum, shopping, looking around the shops, and if you're lucky, you'd go into John Menzies, have a look at the games. You wouldn't really know what they are. You'd literally pick up the box, have a look at the cover art. Sometimes inside, obviously we've got the cassettes in there. This is what they run off of. But you would take out the insert in the shop, and sometimes they would have screen shots on there for you to have a look at, and then sometimes there'd be some backstory, but I would never read that. Basically I would look at the screenshots and the cover, and then you'd make your choice on that alone really, and then you'd buy the cassette, get the bus home, put it in, and fingers crossed it would be a good game. Majority of them were rubbish, but because you only had that one game, you would sit there and you would try and get some fun out of it, and you would play it as much as you could to try and get your money's worth out of that game, which I think is probably better than nowadays. Nowadays you put a game on, you don't like it, you turn it off, you just put another game on, whereas back then you've got a game, you've spent all your week's money on that game, so you're going to enjoy it, so you keep playing it. And like I said, some friends would have the same computer, so you would then lend them the games, they would lend you the games, and you know, you just play whatever people had. You tend not to get the same games as your friends because it's pointless, you just borrow what they had. So finders keepers, then Code Masters as well, they were a budget range. I think these were £1.99 as well, but I think they went up to £2.99. This was another game I picked up quite early on in the Spectrum life. Dizzy, again, some good sort of screenshots on the back so you could see what the game was like and hopefully pick up a good game. Both of these games were good examples of games that I took home, put them on, and I was amazed at just how great these games were for £2. It's just crazy. You would get other games in sort of clamshells like this, which are like larger boxes. I think they would charge more for these. You know, you're talking about £7, £8, £9 for one of these games. So yeah, you wouldn't really take a risk on these unless you knew they were going to be really good, because you know, that's a lot of money. That's a couple of months of your pocket money in one game, so you'd hope it's a much better game. Unfortunately, a lot of the times these big games weren't any better than the budget ones, so you wouldn't bother trying to save up for these. There were also around those times a lot of post away games, I think that's what they're called. Basically you'd get a leaflet in a magazine and it would have a list of all these games, which in the shop would be this much, but if you subscribed to them and paid, I don't know what it was, paid a certain amount of money every month, then you'd get discount off the games. So you could get games which are worth about £10, like some of these big games, and you would only have to pay £2 and they would post them to you. It's all a bit of a scam. Basically you pay them monthly. Yeah, you'd have to buy a game every month. If you didn't buy a game, they would just send you a game and then bill you for it, which happened to us. And I can remember my dad arguing with somebody on the phone saying we didn't want these games, and they were going to send them back, and they would say no, you have to pay for them. So yeah, it's a whole big scam. But I remember when you joined up with this this company, they said you got 50 games for free when you joined up. So again, you think, wow, that's crazy. You join up, there's no joining fee, you pay so much a month and you get 50 games right from the off. So you paid your money, you wait for the games to arrive, and then they send you this cassette 50. So it's basically just one cassette with 50 tiny little programs on it. I mean, these games they would load within 20 seconds, and then the game would be literally like a bat and ball game, like Pong or a Frogger or something like that, or not even that good really. So that would be your 50 free games. Yeah, we did do that for a few months, and I remember getting a few good games. Like this is a good example of one which I got, and it was Gauntlet. And again, this was in the big box. So in the shop, you're probably looking about 10, maybe more pounds for this game. This is one of those games as a kid you'd be like, oh, I really want this, but I can't afford it. and I know we ordered this one off of the mail away ordering thing, and it was a lot cheaper. So yeah, we did get some really good games from them, but yeah, like you said, you had to buy a game every single month, and I believe that the money the value of the games went up the longer you stayed with them, which yeah, so that's that. But as you probably are aware, back in the 80s, pirating games was huge. There was loads of adverts out saying do not pirate games, you will be fined and all this sort of thing. But that was the main source of games for everybody. 8 and 16-bit era, you're probably looking at the majority of people had pirated games or hacked games, even up through sort of the disc era in like the Amiga, the Atari ST. They were all copied games, just because we couldn't afford to buy them basically. But on the Spectrum, my uncle, and I also think my dad's cousin or auntie, somebody in the family anyway, they would always copy off a bunch of games onto a blank cassette for us, and every sort of couple of months we would get a cassette with a load of games on it. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, because you have to do like cassette recording, and the more you did it, the worse quality it was. But yeah, that's the way we got a bunch of games, and they would give us a cassette like this. This one says games 86 and 87, so I would have been 6 and 7 years old when I got this. Basically they would record it on there and then write on the front what it is. This one's got Spellbound, Super Test, Decathlon. It's actually got cassette 50 games on there, which is the one I just showed you. So it's got all of that on that one tape as well. Rebel Star, Draw and Storm. So yeah, they've just come on like one of these C90 cassettes. This one's from W.H. Smith's, and oh, the box is actually from Dixon's. So yeah, Dixon's used to sell the games, and the tapes from W.H. Smith's. But yeah, so that's how we would get the majority of our games as a kid. And yeah, I know every single person who had a computer would have some of these, and that's just the way we would play games in the 80s. Another good way that we would get games is through magazines. So the two main magazines I had growing up was Crash magazine and also Your Sinclair. Now these basically, I never read these as a kid, not the actual text inside. There was always loads of really cool articles in here. I would skim through and read a couple of little things. You'd get maps, and there'd be reviews and that sort of thing. Lots of adverts for games, and it was a good way to see all the screenshots from the games coming up, so you'd get more of an idea of what game you want to buy, and so you wouldn't waste your money. You'd just go straight to the review score. If it's 80s or 90s, 80 or 90%, then you know it's a pretty good game. You probably go out and buy it. Same with Crash magazine. This was more my type of thing. It felt more sort of comic-y, had a lot more sort of screenshots, and is more fun than Your Sinclair, I think. So you'd have pictures like that in there. But the main reason we'd buy this is because it would come with a cover cassette stuck on here with sellotape, and on that cassette you would get 4, 5, 6 games. The majority of them would be full games, so you could load them up and play them, but there'll also be demos of games as well, so you'd get like the first couple of levels, and then it'd be like the short version of the game, and then if you liked it you go and buy the actual full game. Red Heat. So that was another way that we would get these. So these magazines, like that one was £1.50. How much was this? £1.60. And like I said, £1.60 with a full price game. So you get the magazine, you get a game, get a couple of games for under £2. So it would have been cheaper than going in the shop and just buying the one game. So that was, you know, if we weren't going into the high street to pick up a game on that weekend, we'd go and get a magazine and see what was on there. And finally, with the games, sometimes if you had a birthday or Christmas, you would get one of these, which is sort of like a compendium of loads of different games in one box. So like this one, it came 10 Great Games 2 by Gremlin. So on the back it would show you all the different games on there. They would probably be ones which are big sellers, been out for a while. They're not selling very well anymore because most people have got them. But then they would put them all onto this, and they'd probably put them on like 2 or 3 tapes inside the box, and then you'd buy that. These are probably about £20, something like that, and yeah, you'd get a bunch of games all in one go. So for Christmas or your birthday, you get one of those. That would just be amazing. To have 10 games in one go, you know, that would last you for months. So that was one of the other ways we would get a big bulk of games, just to beef up your collection really. As well as the games, like I said, these computers were made for programming. A lot of people would have seen this book when they had a Spectrum back in the day, and it would sort of show you how to do simple programming. I've done some of these on my channel if you want to go and check out what the programming looks like on the Spectrum, and you would work your way through that and you'd think you could make a game by the end of it, but you couldn't. It's just sort of like shows you the capabilities of the Spectrum and how to do some graphical stuff on the screen and that sort of stuff. So it's a very cool book, really cool to work through. But also we would go to the library and pick up things like this, which is fantasy games for your microcomputer. So we'd work on lots of different systems. This one is for the Commodore 64, VIC-20, the Electron, the Spectrum and the BBC. And it would have loads and loads of text in there, which you would copy out onto your computer, try and save it onto a cassette without it messing up, and then after you've done that whole book you would have your own game. And then the idea is that you learn how the game is made, you could change things in it to make it your own, and yeah, that's how you do it. I remember getting these and I remember sort of doing 1 or 2 pages and then it wouldn't work, or I'd get bored of it, or I wasn't able to save it and I'd give up. But yeah, these were really cool back in the day. Just the actual pictures and the descriptions, very nostalgic and really cool to work through. But unfortunately, like I said, a lot of these, they would have a typo in it or something like that, and because you're not a computer programmer you wouldn't be able to figure out why the games didn't work, so they were notorious for not working very well. By the end of the sort of 80s, I'd like to say early 90s, is when the Sinclair Spectrum Plus 2 came out, which was the 128K version, which is the console I'll be talking about, the computer, sorry I keep saying console, the computer I'll be talking about in Series 2. So that's it really for the Spectrum. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you. No, so that is my first ever computer I owned as a kid, the Spectrum 48K, and I'll be going through a few of the games that I can remember playing on the Spectrum as a child in the 80s and letting you know my memories about those. If you did have a Spectrum back in the day, please leave some comments below, share some memories that you have of the computer, how you used to get your games, what shops you used to go to, that sort of thing. I hope you enjoy the series and take some time to have a look at my games that I share. If you're only interested in the memories of the actual systems, then obviously once I've gone through all the games I'll be moving on to the next one, and I'll do another little talk like this if you're interested, and I'll work my way through my life in bits. So thanks for watching. Remember to please thumb up the video, that does help me. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.